Welcome back to Combat Tech. I'm Steven, and today we're diving into the next generation of nuclear deterrence, the LGM 35A Sentinel. For more than half a century, a quiet sentinel has stood guard beneath these plains. The Minuteman III Intercontinental Ballistic Missile, ICBM, buried in hardened silos across 5 U.S. states. This iconic weapon has long served as the land-based pillar of America's nuclear triad, alongside submarine-launched ballistic missiles and nuclear-capable bombers. But all systems, no matter how legendary, eventually face the limits of their design. Enter the next generation of land-based deterrent, the LGM 35A Sentinel. From historic inception to spiraling costs and heated congressional debates, this is the story of how the Sentinel came to be and where it might lead us next. Minuteman III, introduced in 1970, inherited the proud legacy of its predecessors, Minuteman I and II. Each iteration represented a leap forward in accuracy, reliability, and readiness. By the late 20th century, the Minuteman family had become a linchpin of U.S. strategic forces, embodying speed, reach, and unyielding capability. Over the decades, the U.S. Air Force extensively updated and refurbished these missiles. They replaced rocket motors, guidance systems, and other essential components multiple times, a process known as life extension. As a result, Minuteman III remains capable and lethal, despite its original design dating back over 5 decades. By 2024, however, the Air Force and independent analysts alike recognized a daunting truth. The Minuteman III could not be extended indefinitely. Mechanical components inevitably degrade. Industrial expertise for certain parts had dwindled over time, and the cost of further modifications ballooned. Maintaining an aging system against modern threats and advanced adversaries would require solutions beyond patchwork repairs. Before we delve into the Sentinel, let's understand why America's ICBMs still matter. An intercontinental ballistic missile travels from launch to target in about 30 minutes. In the first 3 minutes, solid rocket motors accelerate the missile skyward. Once the missile leaves the atmosphere, it coasts along a ballistic path, like a high, arcing throw in sports, until it releases its warhead, which then plunges back toward Earth at tremendous speed. Crucially, once an ICBM is launched, there is no recall mechanism. This irreversibility underscores its role in deterrence. An adversary knows that if it provokes an ICBM launch, it cannot simply call off the strike. Similarly, submarine-launched missiles can't be recalled either, though bombers carrying nuclear weapons could theoretically turn around before releasing their payload. The United States, unlike Russia and China, has chosen to rely on silo-based ICBMs alone. This stance simplifies operations and communications, but also fixes their location, potentially making them targets. Advocates argue that spreading out hundreds of well-protected silos across vast swaths of land forces any adversary to consider the sheer scale and complexity of such a strike. Each silo could contain a live missile, so an attack would have to be massive and cripplingly destructive to neutralize the U.S. ICBM force. In 2014, the Air Force conducted an analysis of alternatives to determine how best to address Minuteman III's sunset. The conclusion: designing a new ICBM from the ground up would be more cost-effective and more technically robust than repeatedly extending Minuteman's service life. What began as the Ground Based Strategic Deterrent (GBSD) program officially took shape in the late 2010s. Soon, it received an official name, LGM 35A Sentinel. Northrop Grumman became the lead defense contractor, charged with constructing a missile system that would last until at least 2075, far into the future of evolving threats, advanced defenses, and potential new rivals in nuclear weapons technology. Developing a new strategic missile is no trivial pursuit. The Biden administration requested $3.7 billion for the Sentinel program in its FY 2025 Department of Defense (DoD) budget, alongside $1.1 billion for the W-87-1 nuclear warhead in the Department of Energy's National Nuclear Security Administration (NNSA) budget. This nuclear warhead modernization is essential for the Sentinel's planned configuration, even though the missile may initially carry refurbished W-87-0 warheads from Minuteman III. By 2024, the Sentinel's program costs appeared to be rising faster than anticipated. The Air Force informed Congress that each missile might cost at least 37% more than originally projected, jumping from an initial baseline of $118 million to around $162 million in 2020 dollars. In military acquisition terms, such an escalation triggered a critical breach under the Nunn-McCurdy Act, an oversight mechanism designed to sound alarms when program costs spiraled beyond beyond acceptable thresholds. Under these provisions, the Secretary of Defense had to formally certify that Sentinel was vital to national security, that no cheaper alternatives existed, and that the program could not be canceled without causing severe strategic risks. This process forced the DoD to revalidate cost estimates, schedules, and program milestones, culminating in a decision in July 2024 that the Sentinel would proceed, albeit with new guardrails to control cost growth. Developing an advanced missile involves testing each major subsystem, forward sections, aft sections, rocket motors, re-entry vehicles, and control electronics. Though the original plan aimed for the first developmental flight in 2023, various technical and logistical hurdles have pushed it to 2026. This delay raises concerns within the Air Force and on Capitol Hill alike, as deferring flight tests compresses the schedule for identifying and fixing any problems. The Air Force's plan remains to procure 634 Sentinel missiles, plus an additional 25 for development and testing, to maintain a 400 missile alert force once Sentinel is fully online. This ensures compliance with arms control commitments while sustaining a formidable deterrent. Yet there's an inherent tension: how to smoothly retire older Minuteman IIIs without leaving gaps in alert coverage, particularly as the 2022 Nuclear Posture Review emphasized a continuous one-for-one replacement to keep 400 missiles always ready. One of the Sentinel program's most cost-intensive aspects lies not in the missile itself, but in the ground infrastructure that supports it. The Air Force must modernize 450 silos and over 600 facilities spread across an expanse of almost 40,000 square miles, updating everything from access security to underground communications cabling. It's akin to rebuilding a massive network of bunkers designed to operate under near-apocalyptic conditions. These upgrades became a significant driver of cost hikes that triggered the Nunn-McCurdy breach. As a result, the Air Force has launched an internal re-examination of requirements to simplify construction and reduce expenses. According to senior officials, a revised acquisition strategy will be unveiled around 2026, outlining ways to cut unnecessary complexity without compromising the missile force's survivability and reliability. Though the Sentinel will initially carry W-87-0 warheads, the plan is for the missile eventually to deploy with the W-87-1, the first new U.S. nuclear warhead built in over 3 decades. The Air Force expects the W-87-1 to reach initial readiness between 2031 and 2032, depending on a variety of factors, not least the manufacturing of plutonium pits at NNSA facilities. In October 2024, the NNSA reported a major milestone: the qualification of the first War Reserve pit for the W-87-1. This pit, the core of the warhead, marks the revival of a critical capability that the U.S. has not exercised at scale since the Cold War. Producing 80 pits per year by 2030 is a daunting requirement mandated by the 2019 National Defense Authorization Act, and success here affects not just the Sentinel, but the broader modernization of America's nuclear stockpile. Accompanying the W-87-1 is the new Mk-21A reentry vehicle under development by Lockheed Martin, tested in June 2024. The Air Force plans to procure 426 Mk-21A units, ensuring it has enough to equip the ICBM fleet and support ongoing testing and potential future upgrades. Any major nuclear weapons program inevitably provokes debate. Critics of the Sentinel argue that ballistic missile submarines, whose missiles are nearly impossible to locate at sea, already provide a strong deterrent. Some go further, suggesting the ICBM leg of the triad might be redundant or even dangerous, given the risk of a hasty launch in a crisis. If submarines and bombers are more survivable, do we need land-based missiles at all? On the other side, defenders of the ICBM force maintain that its very presence complicates adversary planning. With hundreds of hardened silos scattered across rural America, any attempt at a surprise counterforce strike would be monumentally difficult and risky. The 2022 Nuclear Posture Review echoed past administrations in calling the triad's 3 legs complementary, each offering unique strengths: the stealth and persistence of submarines, the recallability and flexibility of bombers, and the constant readiness of ICBMs. Some members of Congress and external experts questioned the push for a brand new missile. Could further life extensions of the Minuteman III save money and avert schedule risks? An independent study commissioned in 2021 did recommend an extended assessment of whether upgrading Minuteman III again might be viable. The Air Force, however, contends that even if you modernized pieces of the old missile, the system architecture dates back to the 1960s, making repeated upgrades increasingly untenable. Ultimately, the 2022 Nuclear Posture Review dismissed the notion of a long-term life extension in favor of Sentinel, highlighting the risk of spiraling costs, technical shortcomings, and the challenge of addressing emerging threats with hardware based on Cold War-era designs. Financial caution is front and center on Capitol Hill. The Department of Defense is simultaneously modernizing the nation's strategic submarines, specifically the Columbia-class SSBNs, and developing the next-generation strategic bomber, the B-21 Raider. Each of these programs demands billions of dollars in annual funding. When combined with the Sentinel and its associated warhead programs, the total bill for nuclear modernization is steep. In addition, NNSA's robust budget for warhead and infrastructure upgrades raises eyebrows among fiscal hawks who worry that such expenditures might squeeze out funding for other pressing defense or domestic priorities. Lawmakers in several committees have asked the Air Force and the NNSA to justify every cost increase with detailed plans for mitigating further overruns. Delays have real consequences. Since the FY 2017 National Defense Authorization Act, Congress has insisted that the Air Force maintain no fewer than 400 on-alert ICBMs. So if Sentinel's rollout lags significantly, or if Minuteman III missiles must retire faster than expected, the U.S. could theoretically dip below that level, even if briefly. To prepare for such contingencies, some legislators and the 2023 Congressional Commission on the Strategic Posture have proposed a variety of options. Uploading additional warheads on the remaining Minuteman IIIs as a stopgap within arms control limits. Exploring a road mobile ICBM concept for some portion of the force, akin to Russian and Chinese models, if silo-based missiles become increasingly vulnerable to advanced threats. Revisiting the viability of deploying the older W-78 warheads more widely while the W-87-1 project matures, giving a hedge against Sentinel's timeline slipping too far. These ideas are not yet policy, but they underscore the unease surrounding Sentinel's possible timeline disruptions. The world has changed since the Minuteman III was first deployed in 1970. Russia and the United States remain the largest nuclear powers, but China's nuclear arsenal is expanding, with recent estimates suggesting it may double or even triple within a decade. Hypersonic technologies, cyber capabilities, and anti-satellite weapons introduce new layers of complexity to strategic planning. In this context, the Sentinel isn't merely a new missile. It's a modernized tool designed to adapt to emerging threats, both in its hardware configuration and its digital backbone. Engineers emphasize the missile's modularity, meaning that as technologies shift or vulnerabilities emerge, the Sentinel's guidance, propulsion, or targeting components can be updated more easily than Minuteman III's. By the early 2030s, if all goes according to plan, the first operational units of the LGM 35A Sentinel will begin replacing Minuteman III, each armed with a W-87 series warhead. Eventually, the W-87-1 will become the missile's primary warhead, completing a simultaneous transition in the nuclear enterprise: new missiles, new warheads, and newly revitalized production lines for critical components. Yet questions persist. Will the system's total price tag remain politically palatable? Will technical and supply chain issues push flight tests further to the right, increasing pressure on the aging Minuteman III? And how might arms control negotiations or strategic stability talks shape the future size or configuration of the Sentinel force? The Sentinel stands at the intersection of history, technology, and strategy. It's a monumentally complex, multi-decade effort, one that aims to maintain the land-based leg of America's nuclear triad well into the mid-21st century. From the rolling prairies of the Midwest to the cutting-edge labs where nuclear warheads are refined, thousands of Americans work quietly to ensure that this powerful weapon remains safe, secure, and effective. For now, Congress and the Department of Defense have given the Sentinel their reluctant blessing, despite spiraling costs and schedule slips, arguing that strategic deterrence is priceless. In a world of competing global powers and rapid technological shifts, the mission is clear. America's next-generation ICBM must be ready for whatever challenges tomorrow may bring. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, share, and subscribe so you can stay up to date on the latest military technologies right here on Combat Tech.